Welcome to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews, and convention panels. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and rpgpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Is everybody having a good Comic-Con?
Yes.
Yep.
Woo!
I'm sorry, you don't sound like you're young and excited enough. I need a little more. There you go. Yes.
Hey, you having a good Comic-Con?
Yes, feed our egos.
One more time to make those guys and those guys jealous. Are you having a good Comic-Con?
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. Well, thank you all for coming to our panel. And welcome to a Fistful of Sci-Fi, where we will be exploring the history of the space western, where it came from, where it's going, and why is it culturally important. So, next slide, please. We are the Arizona Browncoats with a special guest in Jem Springer. He's a podcast host for the Creative Play Podcast Network. This is Megan Hall, the president of the Arizona Browncoats, and acting as moderator today. My name is Zach Hoyt, and I am the communications director for the Arizona Browncoats. So there will be moments where we have the opportunity for audience participation, but because we are on a abbreviated panel length today, I'm going to ask that we hold any questions until I open the floor for that. Next slide, please. So I think to have a discussion about the history of the space western, first we have to start off with defining what a western is. The American Film Institute defines a western as a genre of film set in the American West that embodies the spirit, the struggle, and the demise of the new frontier. So, between the two of you, what are some aspects of the western genre that you find to be absolutely essential when you're discussing the definition of the western and the extension of its genre over time?
So for me, the Western I like is the fact that it's wide open expanse. There's no instant connection from point A to point B. And I think in the space Western, you have this beautiful aspect of we need to get from, we will say, Tatooine to Alderaan, and it's not a quick instant boom. You have to actually find someone to get the stagecoach to, negotiate your deal, go past the dangerous parts of space to get where you need to go, which could be the Old West, or in this case, the space, which that's one thing that I do love with the Westerns, especially the spaghetti Westerns.
Definitely.
Is the sense of isolation. So you can have your gunfight, and basically, if we leave the county, there's no repercussions, right? Right, Mal?
No comment, but yes. How would you make it?
I definitely think that it's, the good guy who is against the big bad in the middle of nowhere again, and it's always this big unknown bad that has a little tiny, easy to beat local, versus, but that local is representative of something that our hero or anti-hero is constantly fighting against, even though just through, it's like, there's that repetitious, it's always the same bad guy, but it's a different face.
Definitely, and that falls really squarely into the aspect of the traditional Western in its original iterations, which I think Sometimes they're called like black hat and white hat westerns. Before
Spy
you
versus
get,
spy.
right, before you get into the revisionist history at all. So shifting from there, obviously for it to be a space western, we also have sci-fi as a genre that we need to define. If we want to move to the next slide. So using the same standard of definition from the American Film Institute, science fiction is defined as a genre that marries a scientific or technological premise with imaginative speculation. So what are elements of science fiction that you find to be especially important in defining the space western and looking at it compared to, say, the Weird West or something like that?
The first thing, pew pew, you gotta have your blasters. You gotta have your fancy technology in regards to weapons and vehicles. You know, whether it's a sci-fi western that's got mechanical horses, you know, or, you know, just to quote some more recent ones, Vespas. Mechanical Vespas. You know, so that way you've got a sense of the not what we see every day in life, but the next rendition of what it would be more advanced, even though it might be ancient, clunky, but more advanced. As you know, we see with the blasters, with, you know, some space westerns do shields and things like that make it a little more than just your typical western. Or
I kind of was in that same realm of thought. There's always this overcomplicated, it sounds super scientific and it's 90% fake. And but it's like, okay, this is the universe we're in, this is the math we're using, this is these are the technology that we're pretending that exists. Oh yeah, it looks like that. It looks like your cell phone that you got 10 years ago, but I promise it's much, much more advanced.
See, it's interesting you bring up the cell phone, because technology is always advancing, and science and standards of what makes science fiction are constantly being redefined. At what point do you feel the advancement of technology passing the expectations of the status quo? How does that change and alter how we approach defining or looking at science fiction or space westerns?
Well, I mean, let's talk like Star Trek. You know, Star Trek from the 70s. The idea of having these big video screens of conversations, that was mind-blowing back then. You know, even the Jetsons kind of replicated that. Now, we do that in our palm of our hand, so that's not really advanced technology. You know, so, setting the phasers from stun to kill, you know, our tasers do that too nowadays. So we have to come up with new ideas that are beyond where we're living at to keep it relevant for newer eyes and ears to be able to go, oh, this is cool, yeah, and kind of bring in that new audience.
It's got to have that snazzy tech, which one nice thing with the progression of sci-fi through the generations is conceptualization. Star Trek, you flipped your phone over, and that was the concept of the flip phone that we got generations later. And sci-fi is a great gift, can help us conceptualize, why don't we do that? Okay, now that we have the concept, let's figure out the mechanical to fix that. So I think we got our cool ships.
Definitely. Why aren't our cars floating yet?
Soon.
That's promised to fly
Those
cars.
jets and cars were overdue.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So to pivot a little bit, obviously, space westerns are in space. I think an important genre when we're talking about space westerns to look at before we start taking a close look at the merging of science fiction and science fiction and westerns in that way is the Weird West concept. Next slide, please. So the Weird West, of course, being blending elements from other genres, whether they're fantasy or science fiction, in a way that alters reality and redefines the status quo and what's going on in the West. What elements do you feel are most easily added or taken away from Westerns while keeping them in the West? Like, what if we move it to Australia? If we take away
Quickly then.
Right. Well, yes. If we take away horses and replace them with motorcycles, right? What elements and how does mixing genres like that in the big picture shape? How do you think it's shaped the development of things like Star Wars, Star Trek, Firefly, things like that?
One aspect in westerns, and it translates across all mixed genres, I think, is the lone hero against the big bad, or the lone hero that wanders into town and realizes here's these people who put up with the thing that's not right. So it's the, to quote Firefly, that just ain't right, and it's we might not be good people, but we're better than the people that are pushing you down. So whether it's the land baron or the cattle baron that thinks that they have a right to everything and nobody else is allowed anything else.
Man, I was just watching something. I hate that I can't remember what it was, but it was it's silly. It was Leverage, the new Leverage. Leverage, Redemption.
A great show.
Yes. But they're introducing a young new cast. She's like, oh, and she's really excited, like, oh, I'm a hero. And Sophie, she's like, we're not heroes. We're just necessary. Because, and that's very Western based. Like that show in itself is not, it hits a lot of Western notes while being modern day.
Mm-hmm. Because with westerns, you get a lot of the goods of the many versus the few. That argument comes up a lot in the westerns.
Yeah.
Especially for the lone individual, you know.
Breaking the law for the better good, becoming an outlaw, is because it used to be the good guy was the sheriff, and then I used to know when it turned.
Some jaded.
But it turned, and then it's the government is the enemy, and the good guys are really breaking the law and technically criminals.
So that's the development of the revisionist Western,
right?
Which is marked primarily with the rise of like spaghetti westerns being a big part of it, of course. So that's an important transition, and then that carries forward through like the neo-Western concept, right?
And in today's society.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even if you look at what was the Western remake that came out a couple of years ago?
Magnificent Seven.
It may have been that one.
Which is a remake of a Japanese movie.
Right. Yeah, well, and that is the Magnificent Seven stories, one we'll talk about very specifically in a moment. But what are some other, I think, really influential titles that you guys would like to touch on in regards to Weird West or early Westerns or things?
Well, I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's such a great example of a Weird West is the Wild Wild West starring Will Smith, because it took that it took the steampunk elements, but it followed the Western pattern. I do like that it kind of took the damsel in distress and made her be playing them the entire time for her own benefit, and it took the traditional Western, made it a little technological with its steampunk. Got you interested. The villain was, I think he was like a robot spider man.
Yeah.
But then and then at the end it's like, nope, you don't get the girl. You worked, you didn't, you followed the plot to the T, and you didn't get your reward.
James, do you have any titles specifically in mind?
Not anyone in mind besides Wild Wild West, but I was also going to throw up for the Weird West was show of hands of anyone who remembers the old 1960s show Wild Wild West. Yeah, it was a great show. Not only did it have great intro and exit scenes because it took bits of the episode, but they totally,
I love rotoscopes.
And they blended so many different, we'll say, episodic topic of the day back then, and put it all in a weird Western angle of these Secret Service agents that were able to do basically anything they wanted to make right in the situation. And they just had to go back to the president and explain this is why we did it. Which was the crooked government. Shh, we're higher up. We talk to the president.
And that's a show that is really, I think, underrated as far as how influential it was long term. A lot of people don't remember the show itself, but if you look at the structure of a lot of modern TV, man, that huge shifts in the writing styles and things originating around that era. As far as the audience goes, are there any, I'll take a couple questions or comments from the audience in regards to the development of early Westerns, the definition of Westerns, Weird West, things like that. Is there anything that any input we have? Yes, sir.
I think one of the things that I think that a lot of people have enjoyed is going back to one of the spaghetti westerns is Clint Eastwood's movies.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Good, Bad, and Ugly, Fistful of Dollars. Because he's not a nice guy. He's a douchebag.
And Clint Eastwood transitioned from singing cowboy,
all
the way to the spaghetti western, very jaded darkness.
Badass douchebag.
I mean, let's paint your town red.
Yeah, we'll paint the town red.
All right, in the third row.
One of the things I think about the West, though, not only is it the good guy versus the bad guy, it's the good guy and everybody versus the environment.
It is, and
Man
man versus environment is a huge thing, and the success of man over the environment is actually part of the Institute's definition, right? It's the fall of, or the demise of the new frontier and it becoming settled. Anyone else in the audience? Over here, yes sir.
More on the sci-fi side of things, I think it's not usually just like the cool tech that they have, but like specifically the idea that tech or society can be changed slightly, and how does that play out in everyday life? So, whether that's what if people could choose their specific genetics, or all the way to what if people could have everything done for them all day, they didn't have to work, stuff like that.
Yeah, and that ties in really well with the Weird West discussion. One of my favorite recent Weird Westerns is the tech. It meets all the criteria. Is the Fallout TV series that came out. Very much handles that, and it deals with that, right? Like all of those sci-fi elements, but not in a space setting, obviously. So really fascinating.
Fallout does a really good job at that.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a cowboy. Ooh.
Yeah, and it knocks it out of the park, and it follows all the tropes, and I love it for it. It's fantastic.
Especially since we get to see both the black hat and the white hat aspect of them.
Yes, and the struggle between the two, which is cool. And something that actually carries forward into the proto-space western era. If you can get the next slide. So the early years of space westerns, you have the proto-space western forming, where you have elements of the western applied to sci-fi without it being distinctly a western. That would be shows Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, any of your John Carter of Mars media, and that kind of era of pulp media really defines that. So what early works of fiction do you see as being particularly influential to the development of the space western genre?
I think John Carter of Mars is one of the biggest ones, and it's really underrated as a writing. That here you have Civil War era, so very Victorian, very steampunk, of person being transported from Earth to a faraway desert planet. It's not like sci-fi doesn't love their desert planets. I'm just gonna say that. And all of a sudden you have the new technology, the I'm off to save the princess, so it kind of brings back almost Victorian steampunk almost, but then it brings back into the fantasy angle. So it literally goes back to your knight saving princess versus monsters. And then it introduced the idea that there's other creatures on the planet. So you've got these, white apes that got the 4 arms. You've got another variety of apes, and you find out there's a conflict he doesn't know about. So just like when he's back home during the Civil War era, there's a conflict between two groups of people who are almost identical, but different colors, and that's their reason for fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the stupid human Martians. They're just
Right.
stupid.
How about you, Megan?
Well, I mean, you said him. Buck Rogers. Like, so many people have, the last time we did this panel, I asked, who's seen Buck Rogers? And like, more people rose their hand than, okay, see, this is more what I expected. 2 people in the room. Oh, 3, okay. But, you probably know, every single one of you know, Lightyear is based off Buck Rogers.
Yeah.
Because it's just so ingrained into our society. It's kind of like with the Game of Thrones, if someone says, oh, winter is coming, even if you've never seen it, you're like, oh, that's a Game of Thrones reference. I've never seen Breaking Bad, but when they made a reference to it in, the Bunny movie, the Bunny Cop movie,
Yeah.
Disney movie. Yeah,
Zootopia,
Zootopia.
yeah.
I was like, oh, that's a Breaking Bad reference.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what Buck Rogers is. Like, he is so just inner society. He's just been graduated up that, you know, you can go and say, oh yeah, that's based on Buck Rogers. Oh, have you seen Buck Rogers? Oh, hey, look at that over there, you know? And I think that's fascinating that we can do that as a society in so many different ways.
So, moving forward in time, we have these proto-space westerns, and then we have the first actual true space western being developed. It's widely considered to be C.L. Moore's Northwest of Earth. Are you familiar with that work, Jim?
No, vaguely.
Very vaguely, yeah. Okay. Northwest of Earth is actually provided the template for the character of Han Solo. For anyone who's not familiar with it, C.L. Moore was a female author writing from the, I think, mid-30s through the 50s, if I recall correctly, and she wrote originally for Weird Tales magazine, and then eventually that would offshoot into a magazine that was actually called Space Western. And then her work would be compiled into several novels and novellas. It's a hugely influential work. I think it highlights something that we continue to see today with like new Star Wars shows and things like that, in that women are continually at the forefront of the development of the space western genre and sci-fi as a whole. What do you think, how do you think that the knowledge, like, because C.L. Moore published under C.L. Moore rather than Catherine Moore for accessibility reasons. That's changed now. How do you guys view the changes there as far as opening up the accessibility of sci-fi and the space western to the general public?
Oh, men are staring at me. Okay.
Yes.
I gotta put on my gender hat. Sorry.
No. I was looking at Jen's beautiful hair and eyes. Whichever one of you'd like to start.
Oh, he stared at me too. I think it's one of those things where we write for, like, at least good, like, people that, like, you don't see yourself in the media, so you write something. And then you go, okay, well, hey, do you want to see this? And it used to be, you know, written word was so expensive, you know, both the papers and the printing press, it was very hard to, and in a society where women were traded for cows, you know, it was very hard to be taken seriously. We now have evolved to a place where anyone has a computer, anyone has a screen, you can write what you want and push it out there, and your audience will find you eventually. And it makes it easier for a lot of great ideas to come out, as well as a lot of garbage. But, you know, you write it, they will come. And a lot of times you're anonymous. So, you know, if Jim wanted to write under the name Mary Springer, he could write and be like, oh yeah, oh look at this influential writer. No one would know that Mary is really Jim. You know, but
I know a few writers that actually do that.
Right.
They switch.
Because there's just so much. It's so easier. It's easier to communicate and spread whatever your thoughts are.
What do you think, Jim? How has that impacted the accessibility of science fiction as a whole?
I'm a big fan of a lot of recent stuff that's come out. I don't care who writes it, as long as it's, you know, like, I will throw out the dirty word, throw fruit if you don't like it, but Acolyte, I was a fan of that. I was honestly, the wife and I watched each episode as they came out, and I'm like, ooh, I hope they do this, ooh, I hope they do this, because I was a kid who grew up in the 80s with Star Wars, and if you wanted content, you had to take whatever they were giving us. And some of the books, and some of the comic books, were just throwing ideas out there, like in the comic books, a big green Donald, you know, Daffy Duck, what is this I'm getting this week in the comic book? Look, I'm getting Bugs Bunny in a spacesuit. You know, some of the things that they were throwing out there, just throwing ideas and calling it Star Wars. So I was a big fan of, I don't care who you are, write what you want to read, and I'll read it too, or I'll watch it on the screen too. And Acolyte was one of those things that had lots of little things that I would never have thought of in my Star Wars. And that's a big thing I like with getting different content creators making things of, it's my Star Wars, but it's our Star Wars. So it's a zeitgeist of what do you think is in Star Wars, and hey, that's a great idea.
I feel very strongly about the space Vespas in Mandalorian Book of Boba Fett.
I thought they were
that way. I never would have thought of the idea of doing a Vespa-shaped speeder bike.
Yeah.
I think that's really.
It was totally out of my wheelhouse too, and I'm just like,
it's interesting that you both mentioned the garbage that gets put out, right? Because the space western, the space western as a genre was originally, and this is something that many of you may not know, it was literally, there were magazine ads taken out slamming the concept of the space western and saying that it was a genre doomed to failure, don't write for it, encouraging new authors to not participate in it. Things like that it was commonplace. There are several sci-fi authors from the kind of pulp writing era that were adamantly opposed, calling it unimaginative, unoriginal, and the worst parts of both science fiction and Western blended together.
That sounds like a love letter.
And, those phrases actually largely are what led to the concept of Wagon Train in Space, which was the sales pitch for Star Trek. So, first question, first for Jen. Yes or no, is Star Trek a space western?
that's a hard one because it depends on the episode for me, but I would say no. There is a frontier, but it's not really, they're supported by the government, they're given leave to go on this exploration mission. It's more, for me, it's more of Victorian exploration, isn't it? Than Western.
Megan, thoughts?
I mean, I have a follow-up before I can answer that. Which one?
Sure, okay. Original series. Let's go original series.
Original series, I think I agree with Jim. It's, I know that's what it was pitched as, but it doesn't feel, it feels more like Scooby-Doo in space, pre-Scooby-Doo.
Okay.
Because it's we're going on an adventure. It's very like you never, very rarely in the beginning original Star Trek do you really worry about the main crew. And it also has that Scooby-Doo element of, I'm sorry, I can't come up with a better example, of that. Oh, who's the villain? Oh, it's just some old white guy. Just some old green guy. And it was very episodic, very neat package bow. And I think that even episodic westerns, in space westerns, you do not get a tidy bow at the end of your episodes.
It's usually got a weird ending where you're just like, almost cringe,
Yeah.
Was this a good ending or a bad ending? It's now up to you to translate.
There is a solution, but that solution is going to come back and bite you 3 episodes later.
Mm-hmm.
So, you asked which series. Are there Star Trek series that you think very adamantly are space westerns?
With Janeway.
Yep.
Because she was legitimately lost in space.
The wild
She
West.
was lost in space. Okay. There was that continuous question mark, are they going to be okay? Are they going to have a conclusion? And they hit more of those the Western, they become their own law against the elements. That feels more Western than any of the other Star Wars Star Wars.
I agree on that one. That's the one that I fall to too, is the original series, not so much. Most of Star Trek influence, but Voyager was the one that did to me. It was the space western. This is a really divisive subject. The first time we did this panel at Phoenix Fan Fusion, I had someone threaten to throw things at me when I said that I didn't think it was. What do you guys think? Obviously, you can't hear it, so let's start there.
Well, let's see, another one. I think of DS9 as like a port, kind of like a Western port.
DS9. It's I forget if it's the Virginian or Rifleman, where everything is set out of a singular town. It's actually. I'm drawing a blank on it. There's actually a name for that style of
That
Western.
one's good.
And that is
Yeah.
DS9
Because they're
definitely.
bunkering down behind their walls,
Yeah.
and they're basically keeping
Keeping the peace, yeah.
Here in the Marble shirt. Yes,
I
sir.
would say Enterprise is, because that's pre-Federation and everything. They're out there on their own. They're the only Warp 5 ship, so occasionally a Vulcan might be nearby, but otherwise they're out there on their own.
So yeah, and I think Enterprise falls into it. It reminds me of the Lewis and Clark stories almost, like the Lewis and Clark journal, where it's a Western story, but in a very different way than how we think of it typically. That's a really, really great point to bring up. I believe you had one too. Oh, he already did it?
I was good with DS9.
All right. Anyone else? Star Trek is a space Western. Thoughts, arguments, tomatoes. Nothing harder than tomatoes, please. Soft.
And I will also throw it out there for Voyager. One of the cool things that started with that show is it's two factions that hated each other that had to work together. And in Western, a lot of times you do that. If Group A hates Group B, but then Group C comes in and they're just like, pax.
Well, they really borrowed from the most problematic portions of the original Western genre, which
The
was.
McKee they're outlaws.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
they're outlaws, basically.
And it
You had the
reflects
posse
heavily.
and the
Yeah,
outlaws.
and they had to work together to survive, because half of each crew died.
Yep.
Well, it reflects really similarly to the treatment of indigenous people in some of the early John Wayne works and things like that too. Like a lot of similarities there
Yeah.
for sure. Yes.
I was saying for Deep Space Nine, they actually pitched it that way.
Yes.
It was like the commander was going to be the mayor. You had the gambler, the saloon owner, Quark,
Classic
You know.
Western trope.
classic trope. You had Kira, who was going to be the leader of the indigenous people,
Mm-hmm.
and they would not always get together and see each other eye to eye. But when the Cardassians or the Dominion showed up,
You circle the wagons.
yeah,
So, jumping to another beloved series, Star Wars. Space Western, not Space Western. Yes?
To me, it is totally a space western because it starts with a ranch boy on his aunt and uncle's ranch where they farm instead of cows water. And then you got the cantina. Is there more western than calling the bar the cantina? OG Star Wars, pawn shop first. He's a criminal. He's there on the run. He's like, oh man, I owe the big guy money. And here comes one of the bounty hunters who he knows is going to take that shot. So he's just like, sit down. No hesitation, not a good guy.
Still gets the girl.
Still gets the girl, but that's just because her brother was the only option.
It's such a huge universe, so sure with limited dating options. I'm also team yes. The reluctant hero. That's actually something we haven't touched on in this.
It's on the next slide, actually. I think
You're welcome. You're welcome for that
part of
segue.
that, so,
Good segue.
Yeah.
kind of how that affects the Space Western.
Found it.
Do we have anyone opposed in the audience? Anyone opposed to the idea that Star Wars, particularly A New Hope, is a Space Western?
I like calling it a space opera, but that doesn't change my
Well,
answer.
it is both. I think. It is both.
You basically have space actions. You have the Tuscan Raiders. You have,
Yeah.
they're indigenous people that are, they don't like all these settlers. These people are here, and they're.
Oh yeah, and the neo-Western as a genre really works hard. The neo-Western, for quick, Westerns that break the artistic mold from the revisionist Western, spaghetti Westerns era to provide a perspective that is typically either non-masculine or non-white for the origin of the perspective, or similar outfits. Actually, one that falls into the neo-Western category that isn't talked about a lot as it is Logan, the X-Men movie Logan. But that really, it's interesting because Star Wars has done the same thing with the Book of Boba Fett. The Book of Boba Fett is the neo-Western to the traditional Western of the New Hope, which is a super interesting parallel historically to me. So we're starting to get into the development of the Space Western as we know it now. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of things I want to touch on before I ask any further questions, and that's with the Space Western, there are a couple of tropes that really heavily carry forward, and that is the existence on the fringes of civilization is a hugely defining point of it. Characters that are living out of their normal element, they may have a special set of skills that helps them survive, but generally it's something they're separated from or have just relocated to. The exploration of a frontier that is otherwise lawless or untouched by the traditional society, so the Alliance and Firefly being an example of the traditional society. And then the last one that is hugely defining as a Space Western is the Earth that was concept, which exists in a multitude of different universes. Yes, you had a question real quick? Yes, The Mandalorian is a Space Western. I consider it
Space spaghetti western.
yes, and
100%.
it's super
is Clint
fascinating.
Eastwood.
So
You got the quote. Mando is the Clint Eastwood of Star Wars.
well, the first season is all derived from spaghetti westerns.
Yep.
It's super fascinating.
Even the music, they went for that
Yeah.
classic Clint Eastwood music.
So, looking at the rise of the Space Western as we know it now, with Firefly and things like that, and particularly up to about 2008 would be the era I'd say we're kind of looking at here. Where do you see these elements really form in, like, what are kind of the first media that you see these elements form into a solid genre that is definite and separate from everything else? Like, how do you see that forming in that era?
In that era, wow. I'm trying to not pick anything earlier or later than there that jumps
I would say let's say anything post A New Hope to 2008. Let's use that period.
So, of course, that gives us the episode 5, episode 6, you know.
Definitely.
Any of the Star Wars gets you right back to the Space Western. I mean, like Empire Strikes Back is totally these rebels that have been routed by the government and they're basically gone off to the wind to find themselves something. But one that I like to bring up is Babylon 5. Babylon 5 gives you literally the here we are trying to make peace because humans are humans and we started a war. Who knew the enemy thinks opening your sword out of its saber is a sign of peace? We thought it was you're going to shoot us. So we humans as humans panicked and pulled the trigger, started a war, and now the episode starts with here's how we're fixing it. You know, we've got the Western Fort where we know things are happening. There's different factions here. It's a powder keg because, hey, 4 other Babylons have all disappeared or blown up. And there's always that threat looming on the horizon of what's there next. And you have different cultures trying to volunteer themselves into the mix. And you've got the classic white hat, black hat. In the background, you've got your Vorlons and Shadows sitting back there trying to peaceably let the children play without being overbearing.
Megan, what do you think about the application of the concepts on the slide and to this era of the Space Western?
The ones that really stick out to me as like the ones that really are like the defining ones. We have Farscape. We have oh my goodness. My brain just going.
Are you trying to think of Andromeda?
Yes, thank you for knowing my brain. Thank you. And then actually I would even go and say that like Brave Star, the cartoon.
Brave Star?
And like I can go and
It's
I have
on
a
the list.
thesis. I have a thesis statement about Brave Star and his 4 horse.
Oh.
But
that was for our other panel.
I'm aware, but I'm saying those words
And the
anyway so that
choice
it
of
gets
villain.
to. But it's definitely those 3. Like if you, like those are the ones. And actually, no, I'm gonna add a 4th one: the Transformers. The '80s version of Transformers is 100% a space western.
It's reversed though, because it's not the Earth that was isn't Earth.
No, but it still is the destroyed planet.
Right.
And then the
I can
villains.
see that. That's
It just
Ooh.
twists.
I know
twists
some
the
people
idea.
that would like roll, like they would be throwing fists over that.
Oh,
That's-
I will bring
ooh.
my fists back at him. Let's go.
Um,
I love a good spar.
and you know, like this is also the era of, I believe this is the era of Trigun and Cowboy Bebop.
For your
And,
anime
and, I mean, and we
fans,
have to
yeah.
say
All your
also Firefly.
Firefly.
Well, yes, yes.
Sorry, that was my
So
fault.
I will champion that Cowboy Bebop, totally space western. If you've never seen it, go see it.
It's lovely.
It's literally about a pair of bounty hunters, one who used to be a sheriff, cop, and they basically fly around finding bad guys and do
Well, yeah.
bounty hunting stuff.
One that used to be a sheriff, one that used to be part of a gang.
Part
Well,
of
they-
the space yakuza, which totally would have existed in the Western eras if they would have brought it in. And I will throw it out there: the best bounty hunting system for any GM out there to steal for his role-playing games. They actually have an infomercial for who's the big
Yep.
bounty of the
Yes.
week on their show.
With the hot girl.
And
Oh,
they're
it's
both
hilarious.
in cowboy
Yep,
garb.
the cowboy
Yep.
outfits.
They basically are mocking cowboy garbs, and she's like, hee hee, and she'll tell you what the bad guy did, and he'll tell you how much the warrant is for them. If
Yeah.
you ever roll any RPGs, do the same thing.
You know, and
It's
that-
beautiful.
And you know that operates on a really common trope that occurs in the modern space western. Next slide, please. And that is the found family trope, right?
Yeah.
So I can't believe, for not having rehearsed this, you guys are doing a really good job of rolling straight into my next slide. I'm proud of you.
We spend way too much
You
time
guys.
together.
On family. I'm just throwing that out there.
This is
Um,
my phone call.
So, modern space westerns build on the previous concepts by incorporating the found family concept of building a crew out of just the randos you encounter along the way. Which, if anyone's interested in doing that, we are always looking for members of the Arizona Browncoats. We love you all and love to have you work with us.
Have Browncoat will travel.
Have Browncoat will travel. There's the have gun will travel concept. That really is how Mandalorian starts, right?
And in Western wise, if you've never seen the show Paladin, that's where that book comes from.
It is.
See that show? It's a great Western serial.
I came up with another one that was from that during that time period.
Mm-hmm.
Outlaw Star.
Oh yeah, Outlaw
Yes.
Star is. So this is a truncated version of this panel. This panel is normally an hour and a half long. So we're having to skip a lot of. Outlaw Star is my favorite anime of all time, and
It's
it
almost
is
Once again, you have the
Firefly
girl in a
scene
box.
from that.
yeah,
Almost.
it is Firefly took huge influence from Outlaw Star. I love it so much.
For those that don't know, in Outlaw Star, there's a scene where the bounty hunter guy finds a crate, opens it, and there's a girl in it.
The
If
girl
you've
in a
seen
box.
Firefly, you've
Yeah,
seen
it's
the same
it's
scene.
very very similar, almost shot for shot.
Except they have spaceships that can arm wrestle.
Oh yeah.
The grappler is so cool.
Caster
And
guns.
guns that fire spell.
Caster
guns.
guns.
Yeah, it's all
yeah.
great. So and they carry the Western aesthetic, right? So
Bounty hunters.
let's talk about that Western aesthetic
Can I
in Space Western. Go for it, Megan.
The slung holster.
The low slung holster.
I love it.
I could do an entire panel about the history of that holster design.
I love
that
it.
is a subject I am ridiculously nerdy about. If anyone ever wants to talk about the development of holsters in media and in film, come see me at the Arizona Browncoats booth because, like, I'd buy you dinner to do it. It's
Wow, I
like-
might take you up on that.
Oh, you live close to me too.
He'll buy
like-
you dinner, and if he keeps talking after dinner, he'll buy your hotel room so he can keep you talking. You don't get sleep out of
Maybe
it, though.
it'll be a cheap hotel.
Maybe a range day instead.
Yeah, right.
Something along those lines.
Hotel room would be cheaper.
So, yeah, the low slung holster, the brown duster, it all is super fascinating.
It's all functional too.
And real quick, can someone do me a favor and check what time our panel is scheduled to end? Yes. RoboCop as a future Western. What was that?
At 1:30.
It is 1:30. Okay, that's why I
Yeah.
thought this
So we have
is a
7
super
minutes.
short version.
Oh, man.
Yes, looking forward to the future. I think that the idea that RoboCop is a
Because there's a new
Western
sheriff in
also,
town.
it is a weird Western for sure. And it's one that we skip over for time largely.
I see that bordering on cyberpunk, so that's
Oh,
why
it is.
I was
But that's
And the
its own
crossover into
genre.
That
the
is.
crossover into cyberpunk is beautiful too, and I love it so much.
we love
So
our genres.
we have 7 minutes. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the lasting influence of the space western. If we can advance to the next slide. So the Browncoats and blasters concept. I don't know if I've had this conversation with you, Jim, but I would like to point out to everyone that almost every space series post Serenity that has a rebel force who's seen as being in the right largely utilizes brown coats as their identity. It's even it's become part of the zeitgeist. It's you see it especially in Star Wars. The shift from the black jacket to the brown coat in Star Wars is super fascinating. And the establishment of the named firearm originates with westerns and shifts forward. These are all really fascinating subjects that we don't have nearly enough time for.
Well, at least we hit gray morality.
Yes,
earlier.
and we did talk about some of these. So, what are, like, as far as space westerns go, looking forward to the future, what are some of the, like, upcoming things that you guys see as being either you think they're going to be important to the genre or the spread of the genre as a whole? What are some of the upcoming things? Star Wars Outlaws for me is one I see like reigniting that, and Starfield really reignited
Star Wars
interest.
skeleton crew totally looks like space truckers.
Oh, it does. It does. Yeah. How about you? Upcoming stuff.
I mean, I live under a rock. I
confirm.
I am very, I'm the last to know anything new. But I do think that the themes that we're going to keep seeing echoing are going to be the gray morality, the I'm doing what's wrong to get to the right, and is going to be becoming more and more and more of a repeating thought pattern. I think the Western aesthetic is starting to become cool again. And we're seeing more suspenders again. The suspenders, the low hung belt holster, just kind of walking around, like with the backpacks. They're hanging low, like they're like low on the hips. So I think that we're gonna see more. Those are gonna be what's more repeating.
I mean, we are getting Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yes,
we are.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be.
We're gonna have very low slung holsters then.
Yep.
So we know we're getting more Star Trek. We know we're getting more Star Wars. We know we're getting even more Star Wars.
In different
Probably
platforms.
even more Star Wars if we're honest.
I mean,
I would like there to be more. I wish I could have
Firefly.
more.
Firefly.
There
You
are
know my
comic
opinions.
books.
There are comic books.
I actually wish there was more current written word that I could speak on, because I am much more of a reader. And that is something that, unfortunately, because I live under my rock, I can't speak to new sci-fi that's come out. I haven't read a really fascinating sci-fi book, probably that got me in about a decade. So if you have any author suggestions, I'd love them. But that is something I wish there was more written word sci-fi that is new, even if it's like the last 20 or 30 years new, versus, stuff from 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, because we've moved past that.
Yeah.
And,
Their
great place.
perspectives have changed a lot.
Yeah, and a great place to pick up stuff like that is the Tucson Sci-Fi Convention, which happens later this year.
Second
Highly
weekend
recommend it.
of November.
I believe so. Yeah. So we both I know we have to wrap up abruptly here, but we both of you have presences here at the convention, as well as online. So if people want to reach out, communicate, where can we network and discuss? Next slide, please. Reach out and discuss. Give the crowd your pitch.
All right, so I am Megan with the Arizona Browncoats. We are a Firefly fan club turned federally recognized nonprofit. So we travel the state in cosplay, and we raise money for the local charities for the part of the state that we're in. You can find us on Facebook. We have a beautiful website. I'm really good. You can email me. We have a booth right up by the entrance where you can chat with us. Sci-fi, you want to talk Firefly, you want to talk about making a difference in your community. So that's really, this is a fun panel that we just did with you guys, but really why we exist is to impact our communities in a meaningful, positive way. So if that is something that you were looking to do as a person, that is a need that you were looking to have filled, I would love to help you fulfill that need.
And Jim, you've got a podcast.
My name is Jim. I'm with Creative Play and Podcast Network. We basically are a bunch of geeky friends who started role playing, and we decided we're just going to record this. And I started putting it online, and people started listening besides us. And it was totally so my sister-in-law would keep track of her character stats. That's why we started recording it. And then all of a sudden, people were like, "Are you going to play this game next?" And I'm like, "Yes." So we record con panels. We do all kinds of fun stuff with our friends. We try to get in game with friends and stuff.
We have a new game going. Me and Jim are starting a new game, Star Wars game.
Oh, that's right. After the point.
Yep,
Yeah.
next Wednesday, I think.
So you can find me on Facebook at Creative Play and Podcast Network, or me personally, I'm James Spring. It's actually Springer, but this was back in the day when you worked with your Facebook and I cosplays, and they thought cosplay was something completely different than cosplay, so I couldn't put my actual cosplay photos on Facebook for work to see. So hit me up online. I've got cards. If you can go up to the right by the Browncoats in the fan table areas, the Tucson Steampunk Society. My wife Kelly's there. You can talk to her or Madam Askew, and they can totally hook you up with my contact info.
Yeah, so if this is something you're interested in, a conversation you want to continue, you can find the Arizona Browncoats at booth H20 up near the entrance across from the Balloon Girl. And Jim's booth is right next to ours conveniently. So come say hi. We'd love to meet all of you. And thank you for coming to our panel.
Thank you.
And have a great weekend. And make sure you're hydrating. Hydration station's right out the door.
Yes, hydrate or dihydrate.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, please check out D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Ragnarok Enroll a Scion Hero to Ragnarok Story. Also, check out our Patreon page for more content and behind-the-scenes things, as well as joining us for a one-shot game or two.